Dust rolled across the land like a fever dream, and the wind whispered secrets through the high canyon passes. In the quiet, lonely places of the Montana Territory, where men came to outrun their past, a new kind of story was being etched into the earth. It wasn't the kind of tale told around a campfire. It was a ballad of two souls caught in a maelstrom of dust desire and a love that was as sweet and dangerous as a loaded gun. The blizzard howled like a banshee, and the world outside Jack's blacksmith shop was a swirling vortex of white. At 62, the years had left their mark on him, a constellation of scars from a war he'd tried and failed to forget. The pain in his bones was a familiar ache, but nothing like the hollow ache in his soul. Just as he was dousing the forge, the scraping came a desperate, frantic sound at his door. Caution was a hard-won lesson in this territory, but something in the sound of it, a vulnerability that resonated with his own, compelled him to open the door. A rush of wind and snow swept into the shop, followed by a woman, a slip of a thing no older than 25, who collapsed into his arms. Her face was a canvas of bruises, her lips a bruised plum of color against the blood that stained her face. Her dress, once fine, was now a tattered testament to a brutal encounter. She was trembling violently, and in her eyes a panicked wild blue. He saw a fear so profound it made his own blood run cold. "Please," she whispered, her voice a rough whisper. "Don't let him find me." And then, like a flicker of candle flame, her consciousness was gone. Jack wrapped her in his worn coat and loaded her into his wagon. The trip to his isolated cabin, a grueling journey through the deepening snow. The citizens of Black Ridge didn't cotton to him, a former Confederate doctor turned blacksmith who had left his past behind, but could never truly escape it. He'd built his cabin log by log, a fortress against the wilderness and the loneliness that had been his constant companion since fever had claimed his wife and child. Now, this small broken creature had breached his sanctuary, bringing with her a storm of a different kind. By lamplight, her injuries were even more severe, the brutal marks of a beating, the defensive wounds on her forearms, with the 2 broken ribs. This wasn't a random attack, this was a measured punishment. Jack's hands, once those of a surgeon, moved with a forgotten skill as he cleaned her wounds and applied salves. He'd abandoned his calling when he couldn't save the 2 people he loved most, burying that part of himself in the steady, rhythmic clang of hammer on iron. But now, in the face of this woman's suffering, the old doctor in him stirred. When her eyes finally opened, they were filled with the same panic. "Easy now," he said, keeping a respectful distance. "You're safe." Her gaze swept the small Spartan cabin, a fire in the hearth, his own weary face. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice a fragile thing. "Name's Jack. You collapsed at my shop, and you—" She hesitated, a silent struggle playing across her face. Maria Dolores." He offered her a cup of water, and as she drank, he pressed her. "Who did this to you, Maria? Who are you running from?" She tensed, pulling the blanket closer. "It doesn't matter. I'll be gone as soon as the storm passes." A bitter smile crossed her swollen lips. "I am desperate, Mr. Jack." "Just Jack," he corrected. The silence stretched between them, thick with the unsaid, until finally her words came so quiet he had to lean in to hear. "Judge Wyatt." The name landed like a hammer blow. Judge Wyatt, the most powerful man in the county, a man who ruled Black Ridge with an iron fist, a man who, it turned out, saw women as property to be bought and broken. Jack listened as Maria recounted her tale of being hired as a housekeeper, of the insidious demands of the terror that finally drove her to flee. Her story was a familiar one in this harsh land, a tale of powerful men preying on the weak with impunity. "He'll find me," she insisted, her eyes filled with a fresh wave of fear. "He'll kill us both." Jack watched the snow fall outside. The storm's supposed to last 3 days. "That gives us time." But as he turned to leave, her voice stopped him. "I've been dead for a long time, Miss Maria," he replied, a grim humor in his voice. "Just haven't gotten around to lying down yet." The next morning, the banging on the door was insistent official. "Jack, open up, sheriff's business." Jack motioned to a trapdoor hidden beneath a bearskin rug. Maria slid from the bed and crawled inside, her wince of pain, a knife in his heart. Jack waited for a count of 10 before opening the door, his face a mask of weary irritation. Sheriff Esteban, a solid man who answered to the judge, stood on his porch with a posse. "Sorry to trouble you, Jack," he said, stamping snow from his boots. "We're looking for a fugitive, a young woman, wanted for murder. The word hung in the air, a poisonous, lingering vapor. Murder. Had Maria killed someone? Or was this Wyatt's way of ensuring she'd be shot on sight? Haven't seen a soul, Jack replied, leaning against the doorframe to block the view. Just as he thought they would leave, one of Wyatt's deputies dismounted. Judge wants us to search all properties, no exceptions. Jack's blood ran cold. The dogs were out front, straining at their leashes, ready to track Maria's scent. Just as they neared the rug, the sheriff intervened, calling the search off and ordering the dogs to turn back. There was something unspoken, a shared understanding between the sheriff and Jack. Once they were gone, Maria emerged trembling. "They're saying I murdered his manservant Marcus." He watched her, a question in his eyes. "Did you?" Maria met his gaze, her blue eyes steady. "Not the way they're claiming." She pulled a blood-stained handkerchief from her pocket, wrapping it around a folded paper. She'd fought back, and in the struggle the man had fallen and struck his head. And yes, she'd taken money, a king's ransom of $5,000, but she'd also found something else, a leather-bound ledger. It was a meticulous record of Wyatt's corruption, bribes, land seizures, rigged trials. This wasn't just about abuse, it was about a web of power that spanned the county. "This is why he wants me dead, Jack. Not because of Marcus, but because of what I know, what I can prove." The air thickened between them, a silent challenge and a shared purpose. Helping her meant aligning himself against the most powerful man in the territory, placing himself directly in the crosshairs. Yet looking at her, battered but unbroken, a fire of righteousness stirred within him. "I've spent too many years looking the other way," he said, finally. "Maybe it's time to stand for something again." A sharp crack split the air, followed by the shattering of his window. A rifle shot. They had found them. "To the cellar," he ordered. "There's a tunnel that leads to the woods." She hesitated. "What about you?" He aimed the shotgun at the figures taking cover behind the woodpile. "They've seen my face. Fired on my home. We're both fugitives now." The tunnel was a cramped, claustrophobic passage, a smuggling route from a war long past. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and decay. Maria struggled with her injuries, but she never complained. She carried herself with a fierce, quiet resilience that stirred an admiration in Jack he hadn't felt for anyone in years. He thought of his wife, of the fierce love that had once filled his life, and a new feeling began to bloom in the empty places of his heart, a tender sprout of longing he fought to ignore. They emerged into a world transformed, a stark landscape of pristine white. The blizzard had passed, but the cold remained, a bone-deep ache. The line Shack Cooper had told him about was miles away, a desperate journey through the snow. They rode in silence, their breath crystallizing in the air, each step a testament to their shared will to survive. Maria was pale, the exertion taking its toll, and he saw the flicker of fever in her eyes. He helped her dismount, his touch, a gentle reassurance as he rebandaged her wounds. She submitted to his care, the silence between them filled with a new, unspoken intimacy. In the small trapper's cabin, with a fire blazing in the hearth, they finally found a moment's respite. The flicker of the flames danced across her face, and he saw her with new eyes, not as a broken fugitive, but as a woman of quiet strength and a deep hidden grace. "You're not from an orphanage," he said, the observation, a sudden jarring break in the quiet. Her hands, though chapped, showed no sign of hard labor. She confessed the truth, a minister's daughter, a saloon dancer in Deadwood, a life spent running from one cage to another. The revelation wasn't shocking. Jack had seen enough of the world to know that life rarely followed a straight path. Then she turned the question on him. "What about you? You said you were a doctor. What brought you to Montana?" For years, he'd kept his past buried under the weight of his guilt, the memories of a Confederate surgeon who couldn't save his own family from scarlet fever. But with her in this isolated place, surrounded by the vast and different beauty of the mountain night, he felt a need to be honest. He spoke of the war, of the fire that burned his family farm in the Shenandoah Valley, of the fever that took his wife and daughter. He saw understanding in her eyes, not judgment. "It seems we've both been running from something," she observed. He agreed. "Difference is what's chasing you now is flesh and blood, can be fought, defeated." Suddenly, the night air was broken by the faint jingle of a harness. He and Maria rushed to the window, the lantern held low. Shadows moved through the darkness. A posse. Not just a posse, but Wyatt's men, the same men who'd brought the dogs to his door. They were closing in, He grabbed his shotgun, his hand trembling with a fury he hadn't felt in years. "How many?" Maria whispered, her hand finding his. "Can't tell," he replied, his voice a low growl. "But they're coming." The line shack was their last hope, a desperate journey through treacherous snow-choked mountains. Jack's wounds screamed with every step, the fever a hot coal in his chest. Maria stayed by his side, her determination a palpable force, her hand finding his for reassurance. When they finally reached a narrow pass between two rocky outcroppings, he knew this was where they would make their stand. "We fight," he said, his voice flat with resolve. Maria didn't flinch. She loaded the revolver he had given her, her movements steady and sure. As the sound of tracking hounds grew louder, he watched her, struck again by her quiet strength. A minister's daughter, a saloon dancer, a survivor, all aspects of a woman who had learned to adapt to whatever life threw her way. He pulled his hat low, his heart a hammer in his chest. When the first rider appeared, he fired the echo of the shot, an explosive burst in the silent mountain air. The gunfight was a tense, drawn-out affair. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but their position gave them an advantage. He fired sparingly, making every shot count, the Winchester's roar a primal song. Maria, meanwhile, fired her revolver with an eerie calmness. She had a kind of ferocity he hadn't seen in a woman before. He found himself mesmerized by her. The manhunters' attempts to flank their position were met with fierce resistance, and with a whispered warning, Maria threw a piece of dried beef to the side. The hounds, confused and hungry, ran after the meat, buying them precious moments. "Good thinking," he said, a grim smile on his face. "Growing up poor teaches you a few things about distracting hungry dogs." But the respite was short-lived. The manhunters regrouped, and their determined pursuit continued. With the light fading, they retreated deeper into the mountains, each step a fresh agony for Jack. He could feel the fever taking hold his body, a battlefield of its own. When a bullet grazed his arm, he stumbled, the pain, a white-hot knife. Maria helped him up, her touch a spark of life in the gathering darkness. "We make it through this," he said, his voice a ragged whisper. "Get that evidence to Foster, make Wyatt pay." Just as he felt his strength give out, a voice echoed through the rocks. "That's far enough, read." A figure emerged from the darkness. Wyatt. He was here in person, a rifle cradled in his arms. The judge radiated a chilling coldness. He wasn't here for vengeance. He was here to tie up loose ends, to eliminate Jack, the witness to his past, and Maria, the witness to his present. The man who had terrorized the Shenandoah Valley so many years ago and the man who had terrorized Black Ridge were the same. There was no coincidence, Maria, he confessed. He recognized me. He was just waiting for the right moment, and you were the complication he couldn't afford to let live. Wyatt's voice was a low, chilling purr. "Noble sacrifice, doctor, but futile. She won't survive the night in these mountains." Jack pushed Maria toward a cluster of rocks. "Go," he shouted, a desperate plea. "Go now." Maria shook her head, her face a mask of resolve. "I won't leave you." He had no time to argue. He fired not to hit, but to distract, and in that fleeting moment of chaos, she was gone, a phantom in the moonlight. The next few minutes were a blur of sound and fury. Jack played a deadly game of cat and mouse, firing sparingly, his body a shield against the bullets that whined around him. He could hear the shouts of the manhunters closing in their relentless pursuit, a song of death. He was running out of time, out of ammunition, out of strength. He was a ghost again, fading into the night. He heard two shots in the distance, a cry of pain. He froze, his heart a leaden weight in his chest. Was it Maria? He couldn't afford to wonder. He had to keep them from her. He crawled to a new position, his every movement an agony. He was done. His life had been a series of failures, and this would be the last one. He thought of his wife, of his child, of the promises he couldn't keep. He thought of Maria, her fire, her strength, her fragile vulnerability. She was alive, and she had to stay that way. He found Wyatt crouched behind a boulder, his rifle trained on Jack's previous position. He raised his Winchester, the barrel steady. "Drop the rifle, Pierce," he said, using Wyatt's true name. Porter, the judge, froze. His eyes widened as he saw Jack, a phantom of the past, standing over him. The fight that followed was a brutal, bloody, desperate thing. They grappled in the snow, each man fighting for his life, for his honor, for his very soul. Wyatt was stronger, his contemptuous words a whip across Jack's raw emotions. "You should have stayed in your forge, Reed," he hissed, a knife flashing in the moonlight. "You'll die up here, and no one will ever know." As a final act of desperation, Jack threw himself toward the edge of the ravine, dragging Wyatt with him. For a moment, suspended in air and time, they were two men, two enemies falling together into the abyss. Then the blackness swallowed them whole. He woke to warmth, to the scent of something clean, and the feel of a real bed beneath him. The cold was a distant memory, replaced by a bone-deep ache that told him he was alive. A nurse sat beside him, and her words were a balm to his weary soul. "Miss Maria is fine. She's been here at the fort nearly as long as you have." Relief washed over him, a powerful cleansing tide. The evidence, he thought, the ledger and the letter. "It's being put to good use," the nurse confirmed. Maria was safe. The mission was complete. The ghost of his past was finally at rest. He saw her that afternoon. She came to his bedside, her face luminous with relief and something deeper, an emotion so profound it left him breathless. "You kept me waiting, Dr. Jack," she said, her voice a soft, loving murmur. He reached for her hand, his fingers finding hers, a connection so vital it made his heart race. "I was beginning to think San Francisco would have to wait." He squeezed her hand, her strength a palpable force. "Good thing I'm stubborn," he replied. She laughed, a sound that filled the sterile hospital room with light. "I've always wanted to learn to read law," she said, a new fire in her eyes. "It seems appropriate after everything." They talked for hours of futures that had seemed impossible just a few days ago. The bruises on her face were fading to a pale yellow, a testament to her healing. But the scar on her wrist would remain a tangible reminder of the darkness she had escaped. His own wounds were bandaged, the throbbing in his thigh, a constant reminder of the fight he had won. The past was no longer a cage. It was a scar, a story of survival, of courage, and of a love that was forged in a crucible of dust and desire. Outside, the Montana winter continued its harsh vigil. But inside, for the first time in a very long time, Jack felt the warmth of a fire he knew would never go out. A fire for tomorrow. That's the entire story. Would you like me to rewrite any of the arcs, or perhaps focus on a specific scene and deepen the emotional or atmospheric details? I could also expand on the past of Jack and Wyatt. Let me know what you think.